The Ten Commandments is the portion which is probably the most famous portion in the Torah, maybe equally with the story of creation. The Ten Commandments is what we read about in this week's Torah portion. You'll find the Ten Commandments in the Torah portion this week on page 443. This is the Ten Commandments, right? The Ten Commandments. The most important event in the history of the world. Why is it the most important event in the history of the world? Because it's the only time in the history that God communicated to us directly, as a nation. Directly. I mean, God did communicate directly to individuals. But he came down. That's another big deal. Right? So not only of communication, Marty, there was also an element here of descent. Vayered Havaya Larsina. Let's take a look at that word. I want you to see it on page 441. On page 441. Yeah, this is a very, very big deal. It's verse number 20. Take a look at verse number 20 on page 441. God descended upon Mount Sinai. Do you realize the intensity of that verse? God descended upon Mount Sinai onto the peak of the mountain. God summoned Moses to the mountain peak, and Moses ascended. So when the Torah says Vayered Havaya al Har Sinai, remember what Havaya means. Havaya is infinity. So infinity now descends to where? To a physical space on this earth, for God to be revealed on a place of this earth. And then what happened? Wow. What happened is that it was the suspension of the laws of nature, because when God is revealed, the laws of nature are suspended. What happened? It says they saw the sounds and they heard the sights. That's what it says. Why would they do that? Because this is the suspension of the laws of nature. Remember, Havaya, what's the difference between Havaya and Elohim, the two names of God? When we say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, what are we saying? Hear, O Israel, that Havaya, which is the God of infinity, and Elohim, which is the God who chooses to limit himself in the laws of nature, is the same thing. It's the same God. That's what we're saying. We're saying the God is in charge of the big decisions of history, and the God is in charge of the small details of my life. Is the same guy. Not guy. You can't say guy about God, but it's the same force. It's the same God. It's the same power, because Hashem Echad. God is one. That's what we're saying. We're saying God is one, that not only that there is no other God, we're saying more than that. We're saying that God is the only being that exists, but there's a lot of meditation here. But the point is that we're saying that the God of the miracles that shatter nature, and the God that chooses to conduct himself according to the laws of nature is the same God.
Where you saw.
So what are the laws of nature? The laws of nature are that you see the sights and you hear the sounds. But when God of infinity, when the infinite God descends into a physical world and reveals himself in an infinite world, when an infinite God reveals himself in a finite world, then you'll automatically see the suspension of the laws of nature, right? Which is another thing that happened. You know where else God's essence was revealed? God's infinite power was revealed in this world? Somewhere else, another physical space? In the side of the Holy of Holies, in the temple. Inside of the Holy of Holies. That's what's called the Holy of Holies, because God's essence was revealed over there, right? So what happened? Over there, the laws of nature, of math, was suspended. Why? Because when you measured from wall to wall, and from wall to the side of the ark, you notice that the ark was taking up no space. The ark was taking up no space. In other words, the physical properties of the ark were non-existent. So it was there and it wasn't there at the same time, which is the paradox of impossibilities, which is entirely okay when you're in the dimension of infinity. And that's what was being revealed over this. This is a very big deal that's going on in this week's Torah portion.
I think, to me, one of the biggest deals is that this is the only time that there was communication between God and people.
Now,
every other religion.
That's a very important point.
From somebody else, they read it out.
So Marty's making a very important point here. Very, very important point. That what happened at Mount Sinai is something which no other religion can claim. As Jews, we have the entire nation witness the same testimony at the same time, whereas every other religion is founded upon one person who got a revelation. Think about it. Muhammad in Islam and Jesus in Christianity was one guy. I mean, if that guy was having a bad day, that's it. You're done. If maybe he was having a very good day. Maybe if he was having a very good day and he gave a particularly good speech that day, then you've been barking up the wrong tree for the past 3,000 years.
The Mormons, they're the best.
That's one guy also. James, no, what's his name?
No, I mean, he found the thing.
Who's the founder of Mormonism? It's some guy. No. Mormonism is the guy here. It's one guy, whatever. You can look him up. There's a guy.
Smith,
John Smith or something. Yeah, whatever. Some guy,
But wasn't there duress here? Didn't God lift the mountain up?
Hang on, before I get to the rest, hang on. But I just want to point out what happened over here is like this: is that for the Jewish people, we all witnessed the same thing at the same time.
Right.
Now, what's the difference? The difference is like this: if one guy tells you that the entire religion is based upon him, then take it or leave it, man. Exactly, it's a game of Chinese whispers, right? There's a joke about that, about the guy who descends, this Christian scholar who descends into the tombs of the Vatican. He goes into the secret, archives where they find the original handwritten documents, and he goes down there and he comes back, he's weeping, and they say, well, what did you find down there? He says, the word is celebrate, not celibate.
That's great.
So you missed the one letter, and now look what you did, right? But when how many Jews were at Mount Sinai? There was 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60. Add the women, that's 31.2 million, right? Add the kids, add the seniors. You're looking about 3 million or more, right? If the 3 million or more people witness the same thing at the same time, the thing about that is that you cannot make up that story. Can't make up that story. If you're one person and says, if you were alone in a room somewhere and you say, an angel revealed himself to me and he said X, Y, and Z, okay, it's your word against nobody's, right? But if you're gonna say that in front of the Super Bowl, right, some guy ran on this field with a Palestine flag, you can't make up that story. You cannot make it up because it was witnessed by many, many millions of people. So if one guy's going to say, actually, he carried a flag of Australia, what's going to happen to that guy? When he said, no, it was an Australia. I'm telling you, I was there. It was an Australia. I was in the stands. It was an Australian flag. What's going to happen to that guy? No one's going to believe him. No one's going to believe him. It's impossible for that guy to be believed because you're going to have everybody else is going to say you're an idiot. You're an idiot. We were there too, right? So that's why Judaism, this is one of the proofs of Judaism. This is a very important point to ponder. Such a beautiful point that Judaism is not a made-up religion. When you have a religion made up that's by one person, that's very possibly a made-up religion, because maybe the guy was smoking something that day, right? But when it comes to Judaism, this is not a made-up religion. It's not possible, because when you have that amount of people teaching it to their children and their children's children, and I was there, and great-grandfather was there, great-grandmother was there, it's not something which is possible to be made up. So this is like the most important event in the history of the world, when God reveals himself to mankind and he sets the stage. So what's shocking to us, therefore, is why is the name of the portion? What's the name of the portion? Jethro. I mean, who's Jethro?
His father-in-law.
Jethro is Moses' father-in-law. How does he get into naming rights on this Torah portion? Like, seriously, where do you even come from? Okay, so hang on a second. Let's build up the question a second. I mean, naming rights is a big deal, right? I mean, if you're gonna have a naming right on a bar, in Wichita, Kansas, it's one thing. But if you have a naming right on the stadium which has the Super Bowl, that's a different kettle of fish, right? You want to have a billboard on the highway to nowhere, okay, but a billboard inside of this Super Bowl is going to cost you a lot more money. How much did Jethro pay? What did he do? I mean, how do you even sell the Torah portion? The names, the 10 Commandments, and say, where are you going to find the 10 Commandments? For that, you're going to look in the portion of Jethro. Who's Jethro?
He told Moses to stop draining your cup. and got him,
So Jethro is a fascinating character. Jethro is a guy who was actually the most prolific idol worshiper of his time. The most prolific idol worshiper of his time. Think about this for a second. Imagine we had imagine the Torah portion. Let's put it this way. Imagine if the Torah portion of the Ten Commandments was called Hamas. Be like, what? What? Why? Imagine the Torah portion was called Arafat or Sinwar or Hezbollah. Or imagine if the Torah portion was called who's an idol worshiper today?
I think Christians.
Okay, whatever. Let's say who's the most arrogant person in the world that you can think of? Let's say somebody arrogant. Whatever. Imagine there's someone that.
You have to say Trump.
Imagine there's a person that's a narcissist, right? A famous narcissist, and you're gonna say that's the Torah portion, right? And you'd be like, that is so insulting. It's insulting to the Ten Commandments to call them after someone who worships his own ego, who's an idol worshiper, right? Why then would it be? It's so underwhelming to name the Torah portion of the Ten Commandments Jethro. So who is Jethro? Let's take a look. It's page 429. So Jethro is the father-in-law of Moses. Where do we start meeting Jethro? He was the priest of Midian. He was like the Pope of his times. He was the priest of Midian. And what happened was, this is in an earlier Torah portion, that when Moses is running away for his life, because Pharaoh's trying to kill him. Why was Pharaoh trying to kill him? Because Moses had killed the Egyptian that was attacking the Jew, if you remember that story. So Moses was on the executioner's gallows, and something broke, and he managed to run away. He ran away for 60 years, from the age of 20 to the age of 80. He comes back at 80 to the burning bush. But when he was there, he runs off to Midian, which is somewhere in the Jordan area, or Saudi Arabia. And there, he finds the daughters of Jethro who are being ostracized by the other shepherds. Why are they being ostracized by the other shepherds? Because their father, Jethro, had abandoned the local idol. He was experimenting with every single idol in existence. That's what Jethro was doing. So since he had abandoned their local idol, imagine like the Pope just said, you know what, I don't believe in Christianity anymore, right? Actually, I'm going to try Islam, right? What would happen? I mean, his kids would probably be ostracized in the local Catholic school. They'd be like, you know what? You guys are not cool anymore. That's what happened to the daughters of Jethro. Their father was moving on to another form of idolatry. So they ostracize them, and Moses comes to the rescue, where he helps them with a well, and that's how he marries the daughter. He marries Zipporah, and now when Moses is leading the Jewish people out of Egypt, Jethro comes to visit, and he notices that part of the story here is that he notices that Moses is overwhelmed because he's not delegating. So Jethro gives him the big pearl of advice: delegate. That's the Jethro directive, to delegate. And they create a whole hierarchy of leaders of judges of 10, judges of 50, judges of 100, judges of 1,000, judges of 50,000. And they make a whole hierarchy where there's like a whole system. So not every single case, not every small claims court has to go in front of Moses. He's only getting the Supreme Court cases, right? Good. That was the message of Jethro. So why then was Jethro the one who the Torah portion is named after? It's the Rabbi who explains to us. The Rabbi quotes the Zohar, where the Zohar says at the beginning of the portion of Jethro that the only reason
he recognizes that God is God.
The Zohar says a little different to that. The Zohar says that only once Jethro showed up was the Torah able to be given. Until Jethro, the Torah could not have been given. That's what the Zohar says. It's similar to what you're saying. So if not for Jethro, the Torah could not have been given. And now, okay, whatever that means, but if we can accept that, then we'll understand why the Torah portion's named Jethro, because if he's that important, fine. And the Rebbe proceeds to explain what that means, just like you were saying, Harvey, about conversion. So when the world's greatest idolater eventually embraces monotheism because he had experimented with every single idol in the world, and finally he comes to the recognition that Hashem hu Elokim, now I know that God is the true God. That's a big deal. Let's take a look at this in the verse on page 429. Here, if you go to 429, we'll just look at the bold print. So Jethro, ruler of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard about all that God had done for Moses and for the people of Israel. I'm just reading the boldface, that God had brought Israel out of Egypt. So Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Moses' wife Zipporah after she had been sent away, and her two sons. The name of the older was Gershom, but because Moshe had said, I'd been a stranger in an alien land. The name of the younger was Eliezer, because the God of my father had come to my aid and he rescued me from Pharaoh's sword. These are the two sons of Moses. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came to Moses together with his sons and his wife into the desert where Moses encamped to the mountain of God. He sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am on my way to you, together with your wife, with her two sons. Moses went out to greet his father-in-law. Moses prostrated himself and kissed Jethro. They inquired after each other's welfare, and they entered the tent. Moses told his father-in-law everything that God had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for the sake of Israel, as well as the travail that had befallen them on the way, sea of reeds, and attack of Amalek, and how God had rescued them. Jethro rejoiced over all the good that God had done for Israel by having provided them with manna and the well and teaching them parts of the Torah. But he rejoiced most that God had saved them from the hands of the Egyptians. It was reputedly impossible to escape Egypt, yet here an entire nation had succeeded in fleeing. At the same time, Jethro was pained over the suffering of the Egyptians for being a Midianite, for he was of Egyptian stock. When Jethro heard how the Egyptians had drowned in the sea of reeds and had suffered the very fate that they had wished to inflict upon the Jews, remember they wanted to drown the Jewish boys, he said, Praised be God who rescued you from both the hands of the Egyptians, a difficult people, and of Pharaoh, a difficult king, and who liberated you the people from the authority of the Egyptians. Middle of page 428. Middle of 428. Now I know, and this is the key words, now I know that God is greater than all deities. Now I know. Ato yodaiti. Ki godel havaya mikol ha'elakim. Now I know that havaya is greater than all other idols, and I am familiar with them all. For he has done what no other deity can do. He has foiled the nation's intent by turning the very scheme that they plotted against others against themselves. Now that's an amazing, a powerful declaration by Jethro. So Jethro himself was able to transform his own life. He went from being an idolater, a pagan, to being a monotheist. But also, he was the one that made that explicit declaration that no one else had made before. Now I know that God is Almighty. And it was this declaration that enabled the giving of the Torah. What does this mean to us on a personal level? It means like this. Every single one of us has a Jethro inside of us. Every single one of us has an idolater, an idol worshiper inside of us, someone that wants to schlep us away from what we're supposed to be doing, to schlep us down, to pull us away from our mission, to pull us away from our purpose in order to do the wrong thing, to schlep us towards idolatry. What is that Jethro inside of us? It is our body and our animal soul. It wants to draw us towards luxury, towards indulgence, away from spiritual sensitivities, away from what we're supposed to be doing. When the Jew does what Jethro does, when the Jew takes that animal inside of him, and instead of allowing the animal to run amok, rather harnesses the animal and uses the animal in the service of the godly soul, now the Jethro in you is actually adding to your spirituality, not detracting from it. So just like Jethro was able to actually enhance the life of Moses, he was able to make life easier for the Jewish people by delegating responsibility. He was effectively the efficiency consultant for Moses Enterprises Unlimited, right?
Don't go to the mosque.
The Doge. The Department of Government Efficiency, right? The Department of Moses Efficiency, right? So that's effectively what Jethro was doing. Instead of being an idolater, he came to enhance monotheism. And we can do the same thing in our lives as well. Each and every one of us has an animal inside of us that is trying to schlep us away towards idolatry. And when we are able to use that vildechaya in the service of God, it's like putting a harness on your horse or putting a yoke on your ox. Then what happens is that we're able to, not only are we taming the animal, but actually we're using the power of the animal in the service of God Almighty. So we're able to do much more when. So if you have an ox which is fighting against you, the one you have, level one is to let the ox not bother you. But now you're going to try to plow the field yourself, right? And a human being plowing a field sounds like a lot of very difficult work. But if you're able to not only stay safe from the ox, but actually to use the power of the ox in the fulfillment of what you're trying to achieve, now you're going to plow that field in no time because the ox is that powerful. Same thing here in our spiritual service. One level is to make sure that your evil inclination doesn't bother your divine service. But if you're able to go one step further, not only to preclude any interference with my divine service, but actually to use the ox, to use the animal, to use the Jethro in me in service of God. Wow! Now I'm doing something very, very meaningful where Jethro is actually enhancing and improving my divine service, my mission in this world, and that is the reason why God gives us the Torah. Because the Torah already existed. The Torah existed up in heaven. Why was the Torah given upon this world? The reason the Torah was given into this physical, dark, spiritually dark world is in order for us to use the Torah to illuminate even the darkest points of this world. That's the reason why the Torah was given. The Torah was doing fine before it was given. It was okay. It was up in heaven. There was a whole fight in the Talmud. In Shabbos 88b, the Talmud discusses when Moses comes up to heaven to take the Torah, the angels are like, who the heck is he? Why is he taking the Torah down to earth? Like, of all places, why would you take the Torah down to earth? It makes no sense. I mean, imagine you took a Torah scroll from here, from a shul. It's beautiful in an ark. It's holy. It's a special place. And you take, so I'm here to take the Torah down to the dump. You're like, why would you take the Torah down to the dump? What's the Torah going to do down in the dump? That's inappropriate. That's how the angels responded to Moses' arrival. They're like, you got to be out of your mind. Why would you take the Torah down to planet Earth, a place of rape and incest and suffering and competition and insecurity and troubles and all sorts of atheism and agnosticism? Why would you put the Torah there? The reason the Torah is going there is not because the Torah needs a place to go, but because that place needs to be illuminated. Because the dump needs to be picked up. It needs to be made holy. So the Torah is all about transformation. The Torah is all about conversion. And when Jethro shows up and he's able to experience an internal conversion, then that is the necessary prelude to the Torah's arrival to convert darkness into light, to convert dysfunction into function, to convert a spiritually dark world into a spiritually illuminated world. And there's a very powerful message over here. The message, I think, is that man is the microcosm of the world. I think the message is that, like King Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, I think it is, or maybe it's Proverbs, the whole world is incorporated in a person's heart. Is projecting. The world is a projection of what goes on in your heart. I think there's a famous quote about that. I forget the exact quote right now. But what goes on in your heart is what manifests in the world around you. So when you are in a place of darkness, then you're going to experience darkness. We learned in today's Hayom Yom, when you're thinking negative thoughts about another person, you actually bring out negativity in that person. And when you think positive thoughts about another person, you're extracting, you're bringing up positivity within that person. So what goes on in our hearts are very powerful. Our hearts and minds are extremely powerful. When Jethro goes through an internal conversion from a state of steeped in idolatry to a state where he says, now I know that God that Hashem is the true God. He's experienced an internal conversion. He's transformed his darkness into light. Now the world is ready for the Torah. And as we stand at a time where we're waiting for Mashiach, the question is, are you a passive bystander? Or are you an active upstander? Upstander. Does that make sense? Are you a passive bystander, or are you or to use an image from the Super Bowl, are you a spectator in the stands, or are you a player in the field? So a spectator in the stands cannot influence the outcome of the game. Player in the field can. What the Torah is telling us by naming the portion Jethro, the Torah is telling us that the best way to predict the future is to make it happen. What the Torah is telling us is that our choices dictate what happens to us, what happens in the world around us. You want Mashiach to come, that's not going to happen without you. It's going to happen when you experience an internal transformation. That's what's going to cause the world to be transformed from anti-Semitism to pro-Semitism. When you experience an internal conversion from learning to no longer despise your fellow Jew, you learn to love your fellow Jew. When you move away from atheists and agnosticism within your own self, and you heal your relationship with God, it's then that the world around us will do the same. And that's the meaning of what the Torah's portion is called Jethro. Yes, you had a question?
Yes. The Torah putting darkness into light, is that kind of like what your theme is, Rabbi? Like, we need to be studying the Torah because to shine the light. It's not enough just to have our IDF soldiers. We need to be part of the battle too, but by bringing the Torah in, right?
Absolutely. So when it comes to the war in Israel, people love to say that it's only about the military. It's only about the military. And that's an absurd thing to say, because the Jewish people, we do not rely alone on military strength. We have survived because we are God's chosen people. And that's why it's important for us to illuminate this lack of consciousness, this lack of awareness with light, with Torah and mitzvahs. And we American Jews have a choice of doing nothing for victory in Israel or doing something. As American Jews, it behooves us, it's our obligation and responsibility to do as much Torah and mitzvahs as possible. Now more than ever before. I simply don't understand how it is that a Jew can come in here and be all angry about what's going on in Israel. And then I say to him, you want to do something? I was in an Uber just the other day in South Africa. And the guy was so angry with what's going on in Israel. I said, do me a favor, let me lay tefillin with you, a Jewish Uber driver. I said, do me a favor, let me lay tefillin with you. No, I won't lay tefillin. I'm like, why would you not lay tefillin? Because where was God on October 7th? I'm like, look, I have the same question. But one thing I can guarantee, it's not going to hurt if you lay tefillin with me for 2 minutes, right? I'll even tip you more if you lay the tefillin. No, he refused to do it. What is this? Where does this stubbornness come from? In other words, when you're a soldier in battle, you'll throw anything at the wall in order to win the battle, right? You're not going to say, no, actually, I'm not going to try this weapon because I don't really like this weapon. Hello, you're going to pull any trigger you can in order to try to win the battle. So this is what we need to realize. We are active warriors in this battlefield. We're not just, happen to be watching the show from the East Coast of the United States of America. No, we are one corpus, the Jewish people. And you got different units. You can't just have one unit that says I'm taking a emotional health day today. No, you got reconnaissance, and you got Air Force, and you got Navy, and you got paratroopers. You got all the various units of the army. One unit is the spiritual forces. The soldiers in the battlefield, they might not have time to daven. They might have time to learn Torah, late film, because they're fighting for their lives. But we are part of the corpus of the Jewish people. We need to bring that awareness to the Jewish people. When the Jewish people right now is experiencing a collective awakening. Some of us are still in slumber, but there's a collective awakening where Jewish people in our community are linked tefillin every day like their lives depend on it. Literally, like their lives depend on it. They know that their tefillin is making a difference to the war front in Israel. Now you're experiencing consciousness. You're experiencing people that realize that it's not only about the military, it's also about the spiritual. We're bringing awareness into our darkness. And when we can do that as a collective in our own lives, then the world is an expression of what goes on in your heart. Then what happens as a result of that is that the world also wakens up from their darkness into light, where they move away from anti-Semitism, and they stop the double standards against the Jews, and they stop victimizing the Jews, and they stop blaming the Jews, and they say, you know what? The Jews have the right to peace. The Jews have the right to defend themselves. The Jews have the right to live at peace with their neighbors. And if these people are committed to the destruction of the Jewish people, then they got to get out of there. They've got to be removed from Gaza and sent far away, never to come back. It's interesting. It's interesting, Rob, that Sancherib was one of the most influential rulers in the history of the world. You ever heard of Sancherib? He was the king of Assyria. You know what he did? Sancherib, who ruled 2,800 years ago, he moved everybody around. He conquered the whole world, and he wanted to make sure that there was no rebellions. So in order to preclude any sense of nationalism, he took the Egyptians and he put them in Peru. And then he took the Peruvians and he put them in Siberia. And the Siberians, he put them in New Zealand. The New Zealanders, he put in Ottawa, right? So now nobody felt connected to the land that they were in. Could it be that President Trump is trying to do that with the Gazans? I mean, I think it's awesome because when you have people that are steeped in so much hate, who celebrate death more than they celebrate life, who are more committed to the destruction of the state of Israel than they are to the establishment of their own state. They've been offered a state, I think, 5 times in the past 30, 40 years. And each time they've denounced it because they don't want the 2 states. They want a 1-state solution. More important than having their own Palestinian state is that the Jews should not have their state, which means that the Palestinians or Hamas are effectively a death cult. With that approach, I think that what President Trump is proposing, to ship them out of Gaza and to ship them out of Judea and Samaria, is probably a very good thing, which is similar to the tactics of Sancherib, king of Assyria, who actually changed the course of history.
Because even God and the Jewish people wandering in the desert for 40 years, you needed to cleanse that generation. So we have a generation of Gazans who are
brainwashed into hate,
children that are brainwashed and will never be able to live in harmony with Israel, because from the time they went to school as children, they're taught that Israel is the enemy, that this is their land, that Israel is the occupier. So if you sent the Gazans out for a generation where then they weren't indoctrinated, then maybe 40 years from
you'd
now,
pause the
like
hate.
The Jews, you end it, then you could have Palestinians who would come back because they would just be citizens. They wouldn't come with an agenda.
Yeah.
So it is brilliant.
Yeah. What's brilliant about
it
it,
the
Sancherib is very interesting connection to President Trump. It's also interesting because he's thinking out of the box. When it comes to we've been perpetuating this insanity for 50 years since the 6-Day War. 2-state solution. The only way to bring peace to Israel, to the Middle East, is the 2-state solution. It's insane. It's never worked one time, ever. No, one time did a 2-state solution ever work. The only thing it ever did when we gave them land is that it increased terrorism. So Trump is like, look, that paradigm has failed. It's a failed paradigm. We're going to push it away, and we're moving elsewhere. We're going to ship them out. We're going to give them a good life somewhere else, and we're going to make a beautiful real estate investment in this land, right? So I think it's a great idea, and God willing, it should work out. And God willing, the Hamas should be uprooted and completely removed from Gaza and from Judea and Samaria, so that the Palestinians themselves, the Arab nomads of those lands, should be also freed from their own tyrannical rulers, so they can live a good life, so that those so-called Palestinians can actually go out and raise their children without getting a knock on the door with some Hamas highwaymen forcing them to store rockets under their children's beds and forcing them to have their children dig tunnels, terror tunnels underneath of Gaza. No, let them move to a place where they can live the life that their children can aspire for education, where their children can aspire for success, for wealth, for prosperity, instead of living these terribly bleak and horrible lives where they have no freedoms at all. May we truly see freedom reign. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.